Hello everyone. Today we are going to talk about child adoption in India. We will look at the different procedures that need to be followed when someone wants to adopt a child. Also, we'll look at how child adoption has developed as a family-based rehabilitation program for the child. India has the maximum number of children world over. 40% of these children are vulnerable children. They are children in need of care and protection. The Government of India has time and again looked at various programs and schemes to provide for the needs of the children. We will focus on the non-institutional family-based program of adoption in India. The Integrated Child Protection Scheme has incorporated the various family-based services for children, and adoption along with foster family care and sponsorship is one of the important family-based or community-based program for children. As I was mentioning, the Government of India has developed various programs for children. Child adoption is one of the family-based programs, and this program is developed based on the principles laid out by the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child. India is a signatory and has ratified the United Nations Convention on the Right of the Child, and all the principles of this convention are abided by when different programs and schemes are developed for children in India. We'll now look at what is child adoption. Child adoption is a process whereby an adult adopts a child, takes legally the custody and care of a child who is abandoned or surrendered by his or her birth parents. Yes, so as I mentioned, child adoption is a process whereby an adult, a person who adopts a child, takes the care and custody of the child legally, and the child is a person whose birth parents have surrendered their rights over the child, or the child is found abandoned. We will look at the processes through which a child comes into the purview of adoption. Adoption in India is an age-old concept. We have had many instances in the mythological stories where adoption has taken place. Over the years, it has moved, it has progressed, it has changed. In the earlier times, adoption amongst the Hindu families happened mainly within the family. It was a case where a particular family, the two brothers in the family, one of the brothers did not have a child and would place his child or give his child for care to the other brother. This practice is something that is on today also, but with legalization and with a lot of other procedures that have set in, this has changed. Yes, as I was saying, the adoption program has evolved as an effective program for the child who is available for adoption. We'll look at how this program has evolved. There has been a progress on the psychosocial aspect. We see that the attitude of people who want to adopt has changed over the last so many years. We are finding that there are many people who are coming forward to adopt a child who is not related to them. There is a change in the attitude of the extended family members, where they also are accepting the child who is not related or not within the family. In addition to the psychosocial changes that we see, we also have a few legal changes that have taken place. There is better legislation available now which gives the child, irrespective of the religion of the family, the child gets adopted by law. We'll talk about the different laws a little later, but as for today, we have the Juvenile Justice Care and Protection Act, which helps children, every child, get placed in adoption, and which gives that child every right that any other child who is born into a particular family would have, which means the child has the right to take on the family name, the child has the right to inherit the family property and such other rights which any other child born into a particular family would get. We will now look at the roles played by key authorities and agencies as far as child adoption in India is concerned. The Central Adoption Resource Authority is a nodal body under the Ministry of Women and Child Development, Government of India, which looks into and monitors all child adoption matters in India and also inter-country. The main role played by the CARA, the Central Adoption Resource Authority, is to monitor all adoptions to ensure that every child gets placed in a suitable family, that every child's right to a family, right for protection is taken care of based on the basic principles of the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child and also in the best interest of the child. So no adoption of children should happen not in the best interest of the child. Along with CARA, the Central Adoption Resource Authority, at the state level, there are different organizations and agencies which also assist in the adoption process. We will now look at the role of the State Adoption Resource Authority. The State Adoption Resource Authority functions at the state level and it monitors the entire adoption process at the state level. The State Adoption Resource Authority has a major role to play where it recommends the Special Adoption Agency for recognition by the state government. Only after the Special Adoption Agency gets recognition at the state level would it get recognized by CARA, and then only will it be able to process adoption matters. The State Adoption Resource Agency also links childcare institutions to the special adoption agencies. It is only the special adoption agencies who can process adoption matters and place children in adoption, whereas the childcare institutions are institutions which look after the child, which take care of the child, but they do not have the license to process adoption matters. And if there is a child who is in a childcare institution and can be placed in adoption, that linkage has to be made with a specialized adoption agency, and that linkage is made by the State Adoption Resource Agency. Another important role of SARA is to also expedite deinstitutionalization of children through adoption and other non-institutional alternatives. I already mentioned a couple of other non-institutional alternatives, which is foster family care and sponsorship. SARA also maintains a database of all the children who come in the care system, that is, all the children who are in need of care and protection and children who can be placed in adoption. This also helps to track every child who comes in the care system. At the same time, SARA also maintains a database of all the prospective adoptive parents where children can be placed in in-country adoption and also in inter-country adoption. All this database is maintained on the Child Adoption Resource Information and Guidance System, or what is referred to as CARINGS, which has been instituted under the regulations, adoption regulations, by the Central Adoption Resource Authority. At the state level, SARA has to provide, if necessary, with counseling for the prospective adoptive parents. Where necessary, they have to arrange to conduct the home study process, the child study report on anything and everything that is concerning child adoption has to be processed by SARA. After looking at the role of the State Adoption Resource Agency, we will now look at another key agency, and that is the Child Welfare Committee. The Child Welfare Committee was set up under the Juvenile Justice Care and Protection Act. The role of the Child Welfare Committee is basically to follow the procedures that are laid down in the Model Rules 2016. Those are the latest rules under the Juvenile Justice Act. And the role is to ensure that every child who is orphaned, abandoned, or surrendered by the birth parents is free for adoption. Only a child who is declared destitute and free for adoption by the Child Welfare Committee can be placed in adoption. And this process is in place to ensure that there is no child trafficking or any other illegal or unlawful means of placing a child in a family. The Child Welfare Committee orders the child care institution or the specialized adoption agency to look after the child which is found abandoned or where the parents have surrendered their rights over the child, to look after this child till the entire process of declaring the child a destitute and free for adoption is completed. Now we look at the role of the District Child Protection Unit, or what is referred to as DCPU in short. These units have been set up under the Integrated Child Protection Scheme, and they have an important role to play when it comes to child adoption. The DCPU, the office, the unit, has to assist the Child Welfare Committee in restoring the child who is found abandoned with the child's birth family. As we have been speaking about the best interest of the child, restoring the child or rehabilitating the child with his or her birth family would be in the best interest of the child, failing which adoption is considered as an option. The DCPU functions in line with the child care institution or the specialized adoption agency. The DCPU's role is also to assist in the adoption of the child, where they have to help the specialized adoption agency or ensure that all the data about the child is uploaded on regular basis and in a timely manner on the carings, that is the Child Adoption Resource Information and the Guidance System. There are certain timelines that every agency has to follow, and the District Child Protection Unit has to ensure that these timelines are being followed by the specialized adoption agency. The DCPU office also keeps track of the progress of adoption for each child, facilitating adoption within and inter-districts through the CCIs, that is the child care institutions, and the specialized adoption agencies. Another important role of the District Child Protection Unit is to track the progress of applicants, that is those who want to adopt, and where necessary take action for expediting this process, and this is to ensure that every child who is in need of care and protection or who is in the care system gets placed in adoption early and does not have to stay back in an institution for too long. Where necessary, the specialized adoption agency or the child care institution has to provide professional help by setting up a counseling center for assisting in the home study process or for doing the child study report, any kind of post-adoption follow-up, post-adoption counseling, or also in matters of searching for one's roots if a grown-up adopted young person wants to know more about one's background. The District Child Protection Unit supervises and monitors the adoption program in the entire district. Now we'll look at the Specialized Adoption Agency. This is a very important organization that has a very important role to play and where the adoption process begins. And it is important that all the procedures are followed correctly by the specialized adoption agency in ensuring that every child who comes in the care system who needs to be looked after is looked after in the correct manner. The specialized adoption agencies were set up under the ICPS, that is the Integrated Child Protection Scheme, with the aim of placing children in country or inter-country adoption. We will be talking in detail about the inter-country adoption in the next module. Any childcare institution can apply for a specialized adoption agency status to the state government. And what I mentioned earlier about the recognition that by the state government would be given or recommended by the State Adoption Resource Agency. The recommendation for the specialized adoption agency would come from SARA, and in case of any malpractice that SARA notices, they can recommend derecognition of the specialized adoption agency. The main role of the specialized adoption agency is to take custody of the child and look after the child till the child is placed in adoption. Now, when the specialized adoption agency takes custody of the child, it has to ensure that it meets all the basic needs of the child, the rights of the child to basic food, clothing, health, physical and emotional health, educational, recreational needs, ensuring protection from abuse, neglect, and any kind of exploitation. The specialized adoption agency has to work closely with the Child Welfare Committee and the District Child Protection Unit for getting the child declared free for adoption and thereafter placing the child in a suitable family. In doing so, the specialized adoption agency has to maintain record of every child which comes in their care and every prospective adoptive parent on carings. The SAA also works with the concerned police department where necessary till the abandoned child's family is traced, or if not traceable, the child is declared legally free for adoption by the Child Welfare Committee. All through this process, the specialized adoption agency has to cooperate with restoring the child to its birth family or legal guardians, as that would be the best option for the child. The specialized adoption agency has to maintain all records of the child and upload the child study report on carings within 7 days of the child being declared free for adoption. For children whose birth families cannot be found, the child's medical examination report filled by the pediatrician or the doctor must be uploaded on carings within 7 days of the Child Welfare Committee declaring the child free for adoption. What is important here is also to keep in mind that there are certain time limitations which have been set by the recent guidelines on adoption, so that the entire process of adoption is gets expedited and children are not left in institutions for a long time. Here we looked at what is child adoption, we've looked at the key organizations and their roles in child adoption. We looked briefly at how child adoption has evolved in India. Now we look at the process of child adoption. The entire child adoption process is, as I mentioned earlier, is monitored by the Central Adoption Resource Authority, and they have brought out certain regulations. The latest regulations are of 2015, where an online system for adoption has been put in place. As we go about, I'll use a case study which will explain how the entire process of adoption functions. In adoption, there is a birth family, that is a family or the birth parent who gives birth to the child, and that is where adoption begins. Then there is the child, And then there is the adoptive family, which is the family which takes care of the child or legally adopts the child, and the child becomes a permanent member of that family. Now, in this system, in this we see that the birth parents, once they have given birth to the child and they have given their child in for adoption, that is, they have surrendered their rights over the child, they have absolutely no contact with the child. The birth parents have to go through a process which I'll talk about shortly with the help of the case example. Let us look at the case of Aarti. Now, the names that I'm using in this case study are all fictitious names to protect the identity of the persons who were involved in these cases. Aarti was in her teens, late teens, when she was found by the railway police. She was actually, she didn't have a home, she didn't know where she was from, and she would just wander the streets of the city. And as she was moving from one place to another, one fine day she met with an accident on a railway station, and she was then found by the railway police and taken to the hospital, to a municipal hospital. To understand the adoption process, we will start with a case of the birth mother, the birth giver. This is the story of Aarti, who is in her late teens. All the names in this case study that I am going to use are fictitious names to protect the identity of every person involved. Aarti was in her late teens when she was found by the railway police, where she had met with a train accident. They took her to a municipal hospital, and it was at the hospital that they found out that she was about 6 or 7 months pregnant. Till then, Aarti was clueless about carrying a baby. The hospital immediately, because she was not able to give any information about her family, and she said that she was a single person living on the streets, moving from one place to another, the police were informed, and they were immediately, they contacted an organization through the hospital social worker. The organization contacted was a specialized adoption agency, because it was felt that since Aarti would not be able to look after her baby, adoption would be an option for the little one. The social worker from the adoption agency got in touch with Aarti, and she had a very difficult time to understand Aarti, because Aarti was not able to really communicate. Aarti was not able to give any information about her past, and she was not happy being asked different kinds of questions. It took the social worker a very long time to establish a good bond and a rapport with Aarti, and have Aarti actually talk about and understand the whole process that she would go through as far as adoption was concerned. In the 2 months that Aarti was still in the in care at a home for women, for destitute women, the social worker from the specialized adoption agency kept going and meeting her, tried to talk to her, to explain to her what the process of adoption would mean. That is, what the process would be where she would be surrendering her rights over her child. 2 months later, a baby girl was born, a healthy, happy, normal baby girl was born, and she was named Mansi. Aarti was asked to name the child, but she was not able to give any name, and that's where the social worker named her Mansi. Mansi was growing well, and this was now the time to tell Aarti and get the procedures for adoption, as in the surrendering the child, in place. Mansi, along with Aarti, that is her mother, birth mother, was taken to the Child Welfare Committee. The Child Welfare Committee was given a background of how we got in touch, how the social worker got in touch with Aarti and about Mansi's birth. The Child Welfare Committee understood, studied the whole case, and they decided that Mansi could be placed with this specialized adoption agency where adoption could be considered as one of the options for her. Whatever documents, that is the deed of surrender, Mansi's age proof, uh, Aarti's age proof, a report about how Mansi was developing, her birth history was provided to the Child Welfare Committee, where the Child Welfare Committee explained to Aarti that she had a period of 2 months to reconsider her decision to take Mansi back in her care. The social worker also reiterated this fact to Aarti, and she was asked to sign the deed of surrender. Since Aarti was not in a position to sign, she was asked to give her thumb impression, and the deed of surrender was kept by the specialized adoption agency to be used at a later date. The 2 months period that went by, Mansi was growing well and was developing into a healthy baby, and Aarti went back to the home for the women. This was a time when the social worker kept in contact with Aarti, trying to help her, trying to rehabilitate her. This was also a time when Aarti initially had difficulties adjusting to the ways of the discipline in the home where she was, but gradually, with support from the people at the home and from the social worker of the specialized adoption agency, she started opening up, and she was now confident that she wanted to learn some skills and try and stand on her own feet. However, she also knew that she would not be able to take back Mansi and look after her. And so, when the 2 months period was over, she was taken back to the CWC, where the CWC confirmed her decision and ensured that this decision was taken by Aarti, on her own will and volition, and not by exchange of any money or by force from anyone. The social worker took Aarti after the end of 2 months, that is a reconsideration period that was given to Aarti to rethink her decision of surrendering her rights over the child. She was taken to the CWC along with Mansi. The CWC confirmed this decision by Aarti. They ensured that Aarti's decision was taken by her on her own will and volition, and she was not under any kind of force or any kind of money exchange that went in, where she was handing over her child to the agency. Then Aarti was asked to give her thumb impressions since she could not sign on the document of surrender, and the whole process was completed, where the CWC gave an order to the specialized adoption agency saying that Mansi was now declared destitute and free for adoption. Aarti went back to the home for the women, and the social worker tried to keep in touch with her to try and help her in whatever possible way. However, it was a good thing that Aarti started opening up, and gradually the people at the home, at the women's shelter, were able to locate her family, and she went back to her family. Mansi was being looked after by the specialized adoption agency. This particular agency had a foster family care program. A foster family care program is different from an institutional care that a child receives. This is an independent foster family, a family where their children born in the family are grown up and are not dependent on the foster carers. The female member of the family is the main carer, and she looks after this child who is come into her care 24/7. All the child's needs are met by the foster carer, who is looking after the child till the child is placed in adoption. Just as Mansi came into the adoption bracket by way of her mother surrendering her rights over her child, there are other situations also where children come into the adoption bracket. An example is of a child being abandoned, found abandoned in a public place. When a passerby sees such a child, they would immediately inform the police, and the police would immediately take the child into their custody and would place the child with a child care institution or a specialized adoption agency. Soon after that, whenever it's possible to immediately go to the child welfare committee, the child would be produced before the child welfare committee with all the details about how, where the child was found. All those details will be placed before the committee members, who will then order the particular agency to look after the child till the child is declared free for adoption. In declaring the child free for adoption, there is a process to be followed. The Child Welfare Committee members would then instruct the District Child Protection Unit and the police to try and find who the claimants, whether there are any parents who are looking for this child. Was this child abandoned, or have the parents lost the child and they are still looking for the child? So the District Child Protection Unit has to immediately place an advertisement or place information about the child along with the child's photo in a local and a national newspaper, so that if there are parents who are looking for this child, they would see the child's details in the paper and would contact the necessary authorities. The CWC would instruct the District Child Protection Unit to locate the parents of this child who has been found. Depending upon the age of the child, a stipulated time period would be given to complete all the processes and procedures to ensure that the child has no claimants and that the child is lost and found by the police, and now the child could be declared free for adoption. After a period of about 2 to 4 months, depending upon the time period that is given by the CWC to complete all the procedure, the District Child Protection Unit and the police give their reports along with the report from the specialized adoption agency or the child care institution, indicating how the child is progressing or how the child is developing in the care of the agency. Once it is ascertained that there are no claimants for this particular child, the CWC would pass an order stating that the child is destitute and is legally free for adoption. A couple of other situations that I would like to mention here are when there is an unmarried mother who is underage, as in she is still a minor, and in this case it may so happen that someone accompanying her as guardians or as her parents have to sign the deed of surrender before she surrenders her rights over the child. Also, in such a case, this particular young mother might have to then also stay in a home for young persons till because the entire case would come under the Prevention of Child Sexual Offences Act, and she needs to be protected. So there might be some more investigation that needs to be carried out before the entire case is completed and closed. There might be times when there are a set of siblings, like 2 or more than 2 siblings who are lost and found, and it is important that all the siblings are placed together in a particular child care institution or in a particular foster family, and preferably are not separated even at the time of adoption. And all this is again looking at the best interests of the child, so that the siblings do not get separated and are not placed in different adoptive families. As these children come into the bracket of adoption, Simultaneously, there are many parents, there are many prospective adoptive parents, persons who want to adopt a child, who start approaching different specialized adoption agencies, and they try to understand the process that they have to follow in adopting a child. As I mentioned earlier, since 2015 August, the entire adoption process has become an online process, and we also now have the latest adoption guidelines or regulations of 2017. It is also important for you all to note that adoption is a very vast topic, and there are the regulations keep on getting revised, and it is important that you keep yourselves abreast of whatever developments happen in terms of the adoption regulations. Um, Going back to Mansi, just as Mansi came into the adoption bracket, that was the time when Asha and Abhay, they are they are an adoptive family who wanted to consider adoption. They were in their late 30s, and they were looking at adopting a baby girl around 6 months to a year old. They approached the specialized adoption agency, and they were told that they have to register online. They have to first register on the Kara website under carings, and they would be given a registration number. Their application form would be accepted, and the next steps in this process of adoption would be explained to them. So Asha and Abhay went and registered themselves on carings. They were given an identification number, and then they were also told what are the different documents that they need to upload. These documents are necessary in the adoption process to ensure that there is at the time of assessing the particular family, one knows that whatever information they are giving is true, and there are these checks that are kept so that there is no illegal way in which adoption is taking place. And all these processes have developed because in the past there have been certain ways, certain means that people have used to take children in the name of adoption but use them for certain illegal practices. So when this prospective adoptive family uploaded their documents on carings, they were then assigned a particular specialized adoption agency very close to where they were living. They approached the specialized adoption agency, which explained to them what was the home study process. Now, the home study process that is required under the new regulations has two parts. Part A of the home study has to be completed by the prospective adoptive parents and has to be shared with the specialized adoption agency, which would be completing part B of their home study. Part B or part 2 of the home study is a detailed home study process where a lot of information about the parents is discussed by way of joint interviews with both the couple and also by way of individual or single interviews. The social worker was approached. She looked through all the documents and part 1 of the home study assessment form which Asha and Abhay had filled, and then she set an interview time with them for a joint interview and also individual single interviews. As part of the home study part 2, the social worker Meenal, she covered the home and environment assessment through the home visit. She had to see that where are they situated, whether basic amenities and facilities are available easily, whether there are good doctors, pediatricians, schools, recreation facilities that a child would need as the child grows up. So that was covered under the home and environment assessment part through the home visit. Then in the home study report, she also covered the psychosocial assessment through interviews with the couple. Now, through these interviews, she tried to understand their upbringing, what were the how was the upbringing that both of them had, what was their attitude towards life in general, towards challenging situations, how they were handling different challenging situations. She looked into their marital relationship, their interpersonal interaction with extended family members, with friends, their attitude towards adoption, how were they motivated to adopt, were they a childless couple and because they were childless they wanted to adopt, or was it a decision that they had taken that irrespective of their infertility they would want to go in for adoption. So all that was discussed at length. She also spoke to them under attitude towards adoption about how would they share the fact of adoption with their child, which is very important. She would also assess their financial capacity and stability, because that is also very important in looking after a child. She explained to them that in case the child comes into the family and needs some medical emergency comes up and they have to attend to it, whether they would have the financial means to look after the child in such situations and otherwise also. Their physical, emotional capacity to look after the child, and also what are their expectations or what is the child that they desire. So they were clear that they wanted a child who is about 6 months, they wanted a girl child, a female child around 6 months to 1 year of age, and that was also fitting in with their age groups. Once all this information was put together, they were the social worker prepared a home study report, and this report was immediately uploaded on Carings. Once the report went on Carings, the matching process with any child that was suitable according to their expectations would begin. So now the Carings had the parents' information, and Carings also had information of different children. And then it was that 2 children or 3 children were identified who were matching with the expectations that Asha and Abhay had. The profiles of these children were shown to Asha and Abhay, and they had to select one of the child from amongst these children. Once they had selected the child, they had to then connect with that particular agency where the child was. Now in this case, it so happened that Manasi was with an agency where Asha and Abhay had to travel to from their place of residence, from a different city to a city where Mansi was. They contacted Mansi's social worker, and they were asked to send certain documents to the agency, and then they were asked to come and meet Mansi, to see Mansi. Now when they came to see Mansi, here again the District Child Protection Unit had an important role to play. Before they were shown Mansi, they were interviewed by the District Child Protection Unit officer, who once again tried to assess and ascertain that they were suitable as adoptive parents for Mansi. Thank you.